I'm intrigued by how across world history, witchcraft and vibrant magical traditions have always been associated with rebellion, insurrections, uprisings, and then oppressed groups' reclamation of autonomy, liberation, and personal sovereignty. I won't speak for other traditions, so what I will say is that I recommend you to look into the historical origins of Hoodoo in southern United States or Haitian Voodoo, Santeria in Cuba or the Afro-Brazilian traditions of Kumbanda or Umbanda, or witchcraft and folk magical traditions among pagan Europeans who were persecuted by Christians, or those in Saudi Arabia who resist current religious orthodoxy and for that are condemned as witches. To this day, there's an institutionalized police task force that specializes in hunting witches in the 21st century. Basically, the continued illegality of practicing occult ritual. I can't speak with any depth on those topics, but I can share Chinese history and through that lens invite us to think about what exactly is the correlation between rebellion and witchcraft. 3,000 years ago, an imprisoned duke and his insurrectionist clan revolted against a long-standing 550-year-old dynasty, convinced that the suppressed underdogs had the divine right to rule because that duke, later honored by the Chinese as a shamanic king, was empowered by the mandate of heaven as deliverance from the oppression his clan endured at the hands of the Shang. The Zhou were slaves to the Shang and were often human sacrifices. That revolution by the Zhou against the Shang births the I Ching, that imprisoned duke, the shamanic King Wen. Then, for 1,000 or so years on after, I Ching scholars interpreted the oracle as implying advocacy of revolution. Funny enough, Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao, quoted from the I Ching asserting that it affirmed Hegelian philosophy, Marxism, and supported the Cultural Revolution. I Ching and Hegelian philosophy? What? Scholars interpret the world, but the point, according to Hegelian philosophy, is to change the world. Likewise, the purpose of I Ching diviners is to change the world, not just interpret it. It's not enough to wax poetic about the I Ching. You have to use it to create change. The Yellow Turban Rebellions, circa the 1st century AD, was a peasant revolt against the Eastern Han dynasty led by Taoist secret societies, and specifically Taoist mystical lineages that practiced shamanism, magical spellcrafting, sorcery, and faith healing. They allied with the shamans of various minority ethnic groups in the rebellion. There was another historic rebellion during the Jin dynasty, 400 AD, also led by Taoist ceremonial magicians. In fact, renowned Taoist ceremonial magicians. During the Yuan dynasty, 1300s, Mongols, who the Han considered to be outsiders, invaded and ruled over China, subjugating the Han culture. Han Taoist secret societies then spearheaded revolts against Mongol rule called the Red Turban Rebellions. These secret societies were led by, again, Taoist magicians, sorcerers. In the late 1700s, early 1800s, we had the White Lotus Rebellion. Again, Buddhist and Taoist secret societies, often ceremonial magic based or whose theology was deeply rooted in the divine right of rebellion, sought to overthrow the incumbent dynasty. The Eight Trigrams Rebellion of 1813 was another revolt led by Taoist ceremonial magicians and renowned members of mystical and esoteric secret societies. In the 1890s, the Boxer Rebellion, an insurrectionist, anti-colonialist, anti-Christian rebellion, flared up all across China. It came to be known as the Boxer Rebellion in the English-speaking world due to Westerners interpreting martial arts as a form of Chinese boxing. The rebel martial artists who led the charge were Taoist secret societies who, yes, basically were ceremonial magicians, shamans, mystics, Taoist priests and priestesses, and who wanted to reclaim their nation from the hands of white Christian imperialist rule. The whole point of the Boxer Rebellion, led by these magical traditions, was anti-Western sentiment, anti-Christianity, and also Han nationalism, because at the time, the Qing dynasty was ruled by Manchurians, not the Han people. I talk about some of this in the cultural and historical context chapters of my next book on the I Ching, coming out in 2023, but was recently reminded of how this correlation between rebellion and witchcraft might be maybe universal. There was this which is which discussion panel from the recent 2022 Northwest Tarot Symposium in Portland, Oregon, where we had these conversations. First about open versus closed magical traditions, but then from there talked about the origins of some of these magical traditions. Hoodoo, for example, is much more than just a magical tradition or system of beliefs, but it is a culture of hope and protection in the face of loss and persecution. Andrea Furtick was one of the panelists on that which is which discussion, and she had said, I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly, she said that when people ask, can I practice hoodoo? If you're not a Black person, the honest answer is no, because the practice was not designed for you. In fact, it is in opposition of you. Another one of the panelists, Sherry Schoen, noted how the source of power in these traditions come from a place of deliverance, and it comes from a place of pain. By the way, Sherry Schoen is published by North Atlantic Books, the publisher of all my books, Holistic Tarot, The Tao of Craft, and now this third book, I Ching the Oracle. So if you are not ready to shoulder that pain, to fully understand and embody it, then are you truly ready to practice that tradition of craft? I found these to be really important, impactful insights speaking to hoodoo, and also insightful when we extrapolate it out to consider the states of other magical traditions around the world, especially from cultures that were detrimentally affected by white imperialism and colonialism. This is kind of touching on my previously posted video chat on whether Taoist mystical religious practices are open or closed. I said in that video that the practices are open, but there are divine gatekeepers. A really fascinating question to think about. Is witchcraft fundamentally, innately, by its very nature or premise of existence, rebellious, a mode of power carved out for the systemically powerless, or at least marginalized? Meaning, is there a divine gatekeeper that only gives access to one who fully embodies the pain of persecution specific to the prerequisites of that cultural tradition? Even if you don't believe in spirits, gods, or ancestors, what about mindset? Is there some sort of if-then statement where only if you have been subjected to a truly onerous injustice can you then utilize the psychological techniques of witchcraft to rectify imbalance of power? And is every form of witchcraft, every spell, every anything that is witchcraft, is it by its fundamental nature an act of rebellion? So then the question is, can someone in a position of power practice witchcraft? Or maybe at the very least, to be at least a little more specific, practice certain modalities or traditions of witchcraft where that specific tradition of witchcraft or lineage is premised innately on a channel of power that can only be harnessed from experiences of persecution. I'm asking the question in terms of magical or occult philosophy. Is perhaps the source of power that modalities of witchcraft, or at least some modalities of witchcraft, draw from, is it persecution, powerlessness, and is the intention setting necessarily have to be that of deliverance? I wonder if the divine sentience, the divinity that answers the witch's call, conditions answer of the call on, even in terms of psychology or neuroscience, is fully embodying empathy of that pain. Is the cognitive behavioral therapy technique that witchcraft could possibly be categorized under witchcraft being defined psychologically as a way to intervene and reverse the unwanted and transmute it into something that is wanted by way of the trinity of behavior, thought patterns, and emotions. Is that technique, whether you want to call it psychology or mysticism, premised on a state of emotion or thought of needing deliverance, of not having the physical or social power to help yourself. Because a specific or particular experience is the trigger that activates your ability to tap into the powers that fuel witchcraft. Preemptively, I know I'm not making a lot of sense. This is a half-baked idea, but I also think I might be onto something, maybe. I think I'm going to end here while I'm a little bit ahead because I feel like I got a lot wrong in this video. And I think the best way to go forward is discussion. I'm really interested in discussion to figure out how to get it right. So what are your thoughts on all this? More importantly, what is your hypothesis? What do you believe about the correlation, if any, between rebellion, marginalization, and the power sources of witchcraft or ceremonial magic, or at the very least, if we have to be more specific, particular modalities of witchcraft or magic? OMG, is that the difference between witchcraft and ceremonial magic, the emotional source of power? Because I need to back up a little bit. I did, because I'm lazy and for the sake of convenience, clump a lot of different and distinct schools of thought when it comes to magic into one monolith descriptive of witchcraft. So maybe in your responsive rumination to the points brought up in this little video chat, it necessitates the preliminary distinctions between maybe witchcraft, shamanism, and ceremonial magic. And then from there, you can start parsing through and trying to answer the question, what is your hypothesis on the correlation or connection, if any, between witchcraft and rebellion?